Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick Van Straten, and I'm joined by Ravi Ramaneni. How are you, Ravi?
Hey, Patrick. How are you? I'm good.
I'm all good, thank you. I'm all good. I'm excited for the last week of the window. It feels like this window's been rumbling on since the dawn of time. I think this summer has just been a long one because there was basically not any time without football during it, right? Between the Olympics and the Euros, it just went on forever.
Yeah, it never ended. And then, by the time they ended, I think we already started seeing the early leagues like Belgium and other leagues already start playing. And it was definitely very it felt like there was no off season at all.
Yeah, though weirdly, it also seems like this transfer window has been tending towards a big final week. I think there was something going around the other day that in the Premier League, spending's down something like £800 million relative to this point in the summer last year. And you've got lots of teams who went into the summer with particular needs going into the last week with exactly the same needs. It's an interesting one.
One that comes to mind is Newcastle saga with Mark Guehi. It's just been going on, and forever now. We're talking about 3 days left or 4 days left, and that you might get to a point where there is not enough time to sign the paperwork. So it's been there've been some. I wonder if that's due to the teams trying to, even though they may not like it, but they are trying to acquiesce to the PSR or try to stay in line where they are maybe one or two transactions away from complying with it. They may be out of compliance, but there's well, when push comes to shove, we could do one more deal and then we'll be good. I think teams are trying to maybe position themselves that way.
I think it's also been interesting to see players turn things down, like turn down moves in the case of Martin Zubimendi, turn down money in the case of Paulo Dybala. It's really interesting to see players perhaps thinking, I don't know, more, in some cases more strategically about their careers, or in some cases more sentimentally. It seems like maybe people are realizing that you can get yourself locked into a contract that you don't want to be in and spend a few years in the wilderness.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, on the topic of getting locked into contracts, today we're going to Serie A, which Serie A over the last 10 years has probably become one of the most entertaining leagues in the world. I mean, it's absolute chaos all the time, a real blend of managerial styles. But in one sense, it's the same Serie A it's always been, which is in the transfer market, which, as always, is insane. This summer, we've seen some particularly interesting moves, shall we say. And we were going to start with Napoli, because Napoli had a bad last season. Defense of their Serie A crown went horribly, rolled through a few managers, and then they went and got Antonio Conte, which is kind of fun. Antonio Conte is not only a great manager, but Antonio Conte is from the south of Italy. I think he's from Lecce. So that feels like an interesting thing for them to do as well. You can almost feel that in Conte, that sort of attitude of that feels like a good match for Napoli, of we are looked down on, we don't care, we're going to prove everybody wrong. So in that sense, it makes sense. But on the other, this squad has been playing in relatively similar formations for quite a long time now. And Conte has come in and not only has had to target some signings in order to change the shape, but he's also targeted some signings that feel like he's trying to change something else. Like he wants there to be a different attitude in the side. So obviously he's brought in Lukaku, a guy he knows. We've also seen this big move kind of come to fruition this week. Scott McTominay for 30 million. Lukaku's also 30 mil, I think, plus 15 in add-ons. Where would you like to start with this, Ravi? Because it feels like we could drop in at any point with Napoli and there's something interesting going on.
Yeah, and also we haven't even mentioned the owner, De Laurentiis is another, and Conte being an abrasive personality as a coach and as people manager. First of all, I think Conte, if you look at his history as a manager, he rarely stays past 2 seasons or past the second season. There was only one at Juve. He was there for the 3rd season, but that's back 10 years ago. So you're looking at, you hired a manager who has a very distinct style of playing, very demanding of the players, and probably of the front office and the ownership in terms of investment. Someone that's going to probably not last more than 2 years and has a very distinct style of play, as I mentioned. And so now you are pivoting from what was predominantly a back four squad in the past years, like with obviously with Spalletti, after that with the last year with Rudy Garcia, and then Mazzari switched back and forth between 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's a roster built for a back four type team. Now we're clearly switching. The first 2 or 3 signings being 2 center backs and a wing back, Spinazzola from Roma on a free. So we're looking at a very it's going to be a back 3 that is switching styles. And adding players like Lukaku to this, who I think is clearly Lukaku's best season in the big 5 leagues was with Conte when back in Inter Milan 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, well, I'm going to get the guy that I'm comfortable with, that I had a lot of success with. And this happens a lot with managers that have been around, that they just want to work with players that they have had success with in the past. To some degree, it's okay. But if you're looking at Lukaku, his output, he was in his prime when he was at Inter Milan. That was his prime 2 or 3 seasons. And then he moved, now he's definitely past his prime in terms of his age. And even if you look at his XG output, it has definitely come down. And so like there is that risk, and it's a pretty big deal. I think you mentioned 30 million plus 15 million add-on, which is a pretty hefty deal for if you take into account the factors like you got a manager who's not going to be there, likely not going to be there for more than 2 seasons, plays a completely different system than the squad you already had. And now he's switching everything to fit his style of play. So you are, as a club, I think clubs have started moving away from doing this. I think that this is something, because it's a manager-led squad building that always ends in, I wouldn't say tears, but that always ends in a lot of strife at the end. A lot of money lost, a lot of opportunity lost. So I don't quite like the direction they're going. That would be my summary of this.
Yeah, I think the Lukaku one feels like Conte came in and was told Osimhen's going this summer, and he said, well, if I'm losing one of my stars, then I want to be compensated by being allowed to bring in my guy who plays up front. And we'll come on to Osimhen in a minute, but he still isn't gone. McTominay, I don't really see what there is to say for this. I mean, it just feels like you could get a player who can do this kind of stuff, like run around stuff, a bit of everything, not terribly well. You can get that player for considerably less than 30 million euros. I mean, there was a point a couple of years ago where he looked pretty decent. He was dribbling quite a bit. His progressive passing was okay defense. But now I think he was the victim almost of getting some big goals, and it became this thing where United fans wanted to see him pushed on and freed up to get into the box. And now if you look at his stats, the only things that pop are box touches and shots. And that's it. You don't get much else out of it. Yeah.
So with him, this is another one, is that, as I said, coaches like players that they worked with in the past. That's one of their most common, I wouldn't say blind spot, but it can be a blind spot especially if you work with a player when he's in his prime, 3 years down the line, he's not the same player anymore. Like, you have to be cognizant of that. The other one that they always tend to do, or they almost always try, is players that have done well against them, or the players in the other teams in the league they work at that they have liked. Even though they may not have watched them enough, or I haven't gone back and looked if Scott McTominay played against Conte's Chelsea or Spurs and had a good performance. That could be also another reason. Well, I've always wanted a player like that, or him, the way he does X, Y, and Z on the field. And this happens a lot with coaches. Is you look at the players you have, in the squad, and I think Ian Graham's book mentions this, and I've lived this, where your players more than anybody else. You know your players best. You know their weaknesses. You know their strengths because you train with them, you talk to them, you interact with them every day, and you know them. But what you don't know about players in other teams is you don't know everything about them. Even if, as much as you scout on video and get some references, you still only know some amount of information, and you are glossing over things that you don't see, or you are ignoring things that you don't see. And this happens where, I like how a player does a certain aspect of the game, like maybe the way he presses, or maybe the way he runs, as you said, getting into the box. Those are things that, I would love to have that player, or love to have that. But that a player also comes with other things like that he cannot do, and his weaknesses. And when you bring a player in from that like where you just have some information about him, but not the full information, and you could also find the same skills in another player, but you're so fixated on this one player, tunnel vision on this one player. I think that there is always, like, you end up with, as you mentioned, the price, like you could get the same player or same skill set for a lot less, maybe just shopping inside Italy. Or maybe there is somebody in the squad that may be able to do it that you haven't had enough time to test. Like, you have to give maybe a half a season to see how this goes, or what I have available. I think if, without doing that, if you're going to come in and say, I need these 6 or 7 players, sure, you're going to get 2 or 3 right, just because you can't get it's hard to get everything wrong and everything right. So, but then that doesn't mean that that's the great overhaul of the squad, just because you got 2 out of 6 right.
And I think you could understand it a little bit more if it felt like these signings would push them, for this season at least, into the kind of top rung of Italian teams, and they may end up there. But if it was going to be Kvara, Osimhen, and then David Neres as your front 3 for the season, then I'd think maybe this is possible.
Yeah.
And if it weren't McTominay, but say they'd gone and done an expensive deal for Joshua Kimmich or something like that, you could kind of imagine why they might do it. Whereas these feel like tying themselves into a lot of money going out the door over the next several years, continuing to go out the door after the point that Conte's gone. And I don't think that any of this really makes them, favourites for the title. You'd still look at Inter, you'd still look at Juve. Even teams like Roma, Roma have strengthened as well. It feels like it's a lot of kind of lottery tickets they're buying. I don't know how well it will work out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I don't have much to add here. I think I agree with you.
Well, they're also looking at adding Billy Gilmour, apparently, which is the one. I mean, that to me seems even more insane, because McTominay, there's a part of you that sees the Conte-ishness of him. Billy Gilmour's like this tiny little guy who just passes. He doesn't play defense. He's like he doesn't do much ball carrying. He's like if you took the ball carrying out of Lobotka. He's like a tiny little guy who passes. I just don't quite understand where that one's coming from either. David Neres is much more interesting. Should we have a look at that? Because he's 27 now. They paid quite a lot for him. They paid 28 mil to get him out of Benfica. Now, he was a guy who at Ajax, I remember years ago, actually, Ted posting a radar of his at Ajax, and it was just a blanket. He was amazing in every regard. And he never exploded, but he's had a good career. And to look at his stats, there's an awful lot in here to like, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to like about him. I think in a 3-4, 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, I think him playing behind that 9 on the right side, I think that would suit well. And he's also, I think at Ajax, he was a lot more, I think his best years were at Ajax in terms of output. I think Benfica, his output went down a notch. Also, he became a lot more of a, I think, primary assist and chance creator than a goal scorer. I think at Ajax, he scored a lot more goals. and he was getting into the box number. But still, he gets healthy amount of XG. But I think his shooting probably is not quite above average. But he definitely is a great chance creator. I think he would with Juara. Is that how you pronounce his name? I always get confused.
I mean, I've heard Quara,
Yeah.
with it where it's kind of a V and kind of a W. Like I'm not really
Yeah.
sure.
Quara, and I think that him and I think that with those two behind, as you mentioned earlier, if Osimhen stays, and I guess he's probably not staying at this point because it looks like there is something in the works. So I think that's a pretty good. I think in terms of chance creation, they will both between those two will create a lot of chances. So that front three is a very good one. Now with Lukaku in there, not sure how the dynamic will change, but in terms of chance creation, I think it'll be good. Now they also added Spinazzola, who's also very attacking minded, and for creating chances, are very good. Although he's now 31, maybe coming off, I think he had a horrific Achilles. Well, he had the Achilles injury back in the Euro, right? When he was playing with Italy. It took a while for him to come back from that. I think more than a year. I think more than a season and a half. So, yeah, I think attack-wise, I think I like the Neres signing, even though it's a little bit on the higher side in terms of price. I think at least it's he's still in prime of his career. Again, all of these look like it's 27-year-old Neres, 27-year-old Scott McTominay, and then I think Lukaku is what, 31?
Oh, I think he might be older than that even. Let me just have a quick look for you. I think he's 30. Oh no, he is 31. He is 31.
Yeah. So
God, feels
like,
older.
Yeah, feels older because he's been playing for so long at a high level.
I
just think that yeah. I don't. It's everything of this. To me, to your point earlier, if they're close enough and they're gonna, these moves are gonna make them break into that top 2, top 3, or chance of winning the title. It doesn't feel like that. It could happen. Serie A has been probably the most open competition in terms of who wins the title in the past 10 years compared to, like, say, the Premier League or La Liga. So I don't see these moves pushing them there. At least I'm not convinced.
Agreed. I mean, there's also another 50 mil going out the door on centre-backs. They brought in Rafa Marin from Real Madrid, who was on loan at Alaves last season. Alessandro Bongiorno from Torino, who they spent a lot on. And when I look at him,
25, I think.
Well,
yeah.
If it's only that, that's okay. I saw 35 somewhere else, and that concerned me a little bit because he looks like an okay defensive centre back. Like, he does a lot of defending. I'll give him that. Lots of tackles and interceptions, but he doesn't give you much else. He's not a ball carrier. He's not a great passer. He's 25 years old. He's a solid guy. What's interesting about this is
with Scott McTominay in a back five, maybe there is. I mean, I'm trying to find positives here.
Would like to see it.
Yeah, like I wonder if that frees him up to go more and join the attack because of the extra center back.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were like in a back five.
No. What I meant is that him playing in the midfield probably gets him, like, basically it's almost like hiding his weekness or hiding his things that he's not particularly good at, and then just accentuating what he's really good at. Maybe there is something there because in United has always played a line of 4, so it's different. So I think maybe there is something that I'm trying to find positives here. If you,
it's just weird. I could see that because also if the plan is okay, well, we advance the ball up the wings. That's why we've got Spinazzola, who's an amazing ball carrier from wide. You could kind of understand it a little bit more, but then I find Gilmour stranger because if you just had 2 kind of shuttlers in the middle who do loads of defending and not much else, I think that makes sense if you've got amazing ball progression on the flanks. But then you put Billy Gilmour in there, who, if he's not on the ball, doesn't really give you anything at all, unless you're just trying to, correct the fact that there was, there was massive Italian immigration to Scotland. So maybe now they're just like, right, we're gonna send some Scots to Italy. unless you're trying to do that, then I'm not quite sure I see this one. But who knows? It could be an interesting thing. What I find fascinating though is the effect that this might have on the Osimhen price. So we've talked about Osimhen earlier in the window, and last year, the year before, people were talking about 9 figures for this guy, and now no move to PSG has come to fruition. No move to Chelsea has come to fruition. Arsenal were linked. I don't think they were ever serious. Now, supposedly, Napoli have got relatively far down the road with Al Ali, who want to pay something like 65 million euros. Well, that price seems quite reasonable to me for Osimhen. And also, if they're doing all these moves and they're locking themselves into the amortization of these players for at least a couple of years and into big wages, because Spinazzola, for example, is free, but he's a veteran with a good reputation. He probably gets paid a decent amount. Napoli are now in the position where they're going to need to sell him, and you can maybe grind them down in the last few days of the window, right?
Yeah, and I also wonder the Saudi deal in terms of the terms for the player, they're probably much more superior. Like 65, like I've heard similar numbers for Gyökeres for Arsenal, right? Probably 50, 55 in that range. I think Osimhen, if you're given Osimhen at 65 and all else being equal, Gyökeres at 50 or 55, I would probably lean towards the Nigerian. But like, I bet Saudi's wages for Osimhen are just through the roof. I don't think anybody can match them. Plus plus the transfer fee. That may be why that they're still talking. Is the player maybe wants to move because it's literally life-changing money. So I think that could be another wrinkle in the whole thing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, who knows what Chelsea can pay a player at this point? PSG, nobody will ever know.
Yeah, I mean, although I was reading about the new TV deal for France for the next, I think it's 3 years or 5 years, next 5 years, I think, is a very, very small TV deal. The winner of the league is going to get 16 million.
Wow.
And that is going down from like 42 or 43 million to like 16. So I think PSG maybe, I think they're the only place where they can get real money is the Champions League. But I think they have to tighten their belts a little bit. I don't think they can spend like in the past.
I mean, fortunately, getting that Mbappe contract off the books in the end might not be the worst thing for them. There's also kind of this issue with PSG where in order to, they kind of need to try and win the Champions League. Everyone agrees on that. But the problem is as well, they need a healthier domestic competition in order to get more eyes on it. But they're so dominant that it's just not really that entertaining. And in fact, every time they don't win the league, people see it as more evidence that they're rubbish and that the league's a joke. They're kind of stuck in this regard, Liga.
Yeah, and now I think the news came out today that Ugarte is sold to United. So that's a big price. I think it's around 50-ish. I haven't read the full details, but I think that's another sign that they are selling. Obviously, a lot of money, contracts are coming off their books. And then these big sales, probably even some of their books.
It'd be really interesting to see then if anybody does come in for any of their fringe players, because there are always guys who are undervalued there. And of course, to see if anybody comes in for Osimhen in the last few days of the window. Should we move on to another Italian side who are conducting quite a big overhaul of their own? Kim in our newsletter talked a little bit about Juventus targeting a couple of wingers. They brought in Nico Gonzalez from Fiorentina. They brought in Francisco Conceicao from Porto, a very familiar name to all of us. It's an interesting combination of guys because these guys both play on the right wing, but play the role in very different ways, right?
Yeah. I think one of them a lot more direct and a shooter. Other one is a dribbler. I think Conceicao is more of a dribbler, really good dribbler. So I think that there is, I think in terms of age, also they're bringing in one that's up and coming with high potential and another one that's established. So I think that I think those two are fine. Again, this is almost like the the other way. They're going from a back three to a back four with Thiago Motta, right? Like they played without wingers last many years with like a 4-4-2 or like a 3-5-2. And now and that was one of the reasons, like, you know, Chiesa was playing as a wing back a little bit last year for Juve. This year, obviously, now they're, you know, with the new manager who's done well at Bologna, and he's the Bologna, right? He was at Bologna. Yeah. So he's done well there, and he's coming back. He's not coming back. He's come to Juve, and another team that is doing a lot of recruitment, led by the manager, right? Just like Napoli. The only difference is the manager here is seen as is relatively new and seen as somebody that's going to be a great manager, or like has a great potential to be one of the great managers in Italy. But again, I think the risk is the same. You could say with Juventus, maybe they are a little bit further along, or like upper in the food chain, in that they're closer to winning a title. So if they say that we're going to do this because we think we have a really good shot at the title this year, and we're going to support our manager by doing these deals and getting us there. But I think they're still putting themselves in a bit of a financial bind come next year. I think the issue is going to be these two are loans, and these two winger deals are loans that are going to become permanent next year, or likely to become permanent next year. So you will end up in a situation where you are making signings next year, but you're already committing that money of next year now. So, and then it's going to be, well, we didn't bring any new players next year. That's the sensation people are or fans are going to be left with next year, is that, these guys, we already had them, so they don't count. We need to bring new players in, or, you know, so it's a bit of a risk. But I don't know. I guess if we have to rate, I don't like either approach. I think they're both Napoli and Juve. But if I have to pick one that is slightly less bad, I think it's probably Juve.
Yeah, Juve have more on offer for them right now. You know, the rewards are there. But there's, as you say, Corp Miners looks like it's going to be even higher than we thought. You know, rather than 45, maybe closer to 60 with add-ons. Pierre Kalulu, who is on a loan to buy. Michele De Gregorio, who they needed a goalkeeper. He comes in, he's reliable, it's fine. He's also a loan to buy. And as you say, Conceicao and Gonzalez, they've committed about 10 million euros for each this season. But both of those will get topped up to 40 million euros over the lifetime of the deal. So, there's this huge amortization bomb coming down the pipeline that they're going to have to deal with. Like Conceicao in particular, I think, is the exciting player here. I like Nico Gonzalez. He's a reliable wide forward. He gets shots, like lots of them. He gets pretty decent shots. He gets loads of touches in the box. This is all fine. But Conceicao is 21 rather than 26. And he's got, I mean, he presses really hard, but he's in the top 1% of stats bombs, dribble and carry, on ball value metric. Also gets loads of touches in the box, loads of XG assisted, really good passer too. His shooting, he's got very, I'm one of the best players on Porto shot selection, in that he shoots from everywhere and his shots are garbage. Like, his shots are like 0.07 XG per shot. So if you think of average as kind of 0.1, 0.11, right? Like league average. So he's kind of 2/3 of average per shot. And I can't remember if this was, I think it was in the newsletter, his shot map. And it's honestly just that corner of the box. He sees it, he shoots. So that needs to be ironed out a bit.
Yeah, I have a little term for players like this. We call them dribble, shoot, DDS.
Sure.
It's one of those that just takes a couple touches, tries to get by one or two guys, and then boom, shoot from that. And that's very winger. If you look at his shooting locations, very much a winger who likes to shoot. And
Yeah.
just at the top, at basically the corner of the box. And yeah, that's something that if they can teach out of him or cut, maybe they can't probably completely eradicate it. I think you would still need a little bit of it just to keep the opponents guessing and defenders guessing. But if you can cut 50% of it out, I think he would be even more effective.
Yeah. Even if he's just crossing it to the back post or something, they've got Vlahovic there. It's interesting. It's an interesting blend of playmaking and shot taking forwards, which is actually kind of what we saw at last year, I guess, at Bologna with Zirkzee, with Salamakers, with Orsolini, who I've always had a soft spot for. You kind of touched on it just now, but I want to ask you about it in a bit more detail. Yes, there's obviously the financial risk of doing this. You've got this amortization problem and it's harder to make signings. But that's always true. But when a new coach comes in, is it not especially true? Because it feels like quite often new coaches come in and they say, I need this, 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 and this. And 6 months down the road, it actually turns out there was a solution in the academy or there was a solution in the squad. And actually the problems in the squad are elsewhere. It takes them a while to work it out. I don't think that stuff, it seems at least like that stuff you can't work out in just a summer of training. And by making all these moves, this is the squad they're going to have, the rough shape of the squad they're going to have for some time. Well, Motta's not going to have much wiggle room if next summer he says, actually, the problem was this all along and I didn't really realize it.
Yeah, no, that's always the risk. And I think in both cases, they got managers that they went in. I'm sure they were aware signing these managers that they play completely different style to the squad they have.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be hard to mold the squad they have to this. I think so. There is a little bit of that. But even considering that, I do think that if, for example, you take the approach of Arne Slot at Liverpool, number one, I think you have to give credit to their recruitment department and the management that they got a manager who they probably one of their criteria was, can he use the current squad more or less, right? So that's number one. I'm sure they put some thought into it. They've used that as one of the signals to separate out what from the manager pool that are available. Now, I don't think that happened neither in Napoli or in Juve, because if that is the case, then you wouldn't end up with those names. I think in those cases, to me, from far away, it seems it's more the name. Motta had this amazing season at Bologna, getting them to Champions League for a team that's mid-table at best most of the seasons. And then Conte is obviously a well-known, reputed manager, but everyone knows he had a very distinct style that she's going to come in and ask for these changes. Mm-hmm. Again, like I think, and so number one, that was with Liverpool. Then Arne Slot, I think they haven't made any major signings since he joined, and I think he seems okay with the squad there is, and he's probably trying out a few different things. They don't play like they were playing with Jurgen Klopp. You can see them; they're more patient with the ball. They keep the ball a lot more. So I think he's looking at this and probably is making his judgment of all these players as he sees them play. The season has started now. So I think that's a more sustainable approach to squad building and keeping a squad competitive for a longer period of time without having having to do this huge resource allocation every few years when you change a manager to have this huge cost every 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could also say that, well, you're comparing apples to oranges, Napoli squad and Juve squad, or maybe they're not as ready as the Liverpool squad. Maybe you can say that with Napoli versus Liverpool, but I don't know if I can buy that with Juve versus Liverpool. I think Juve is pretty decent squad even before Thiago Motta came in. So I think that's where I think future is, that you're going to build squads one, you're going to build squads. Squad building is different. Is manager has an input, but it can't be driven by the manager. And then it goes hand in hand that if you have to find a new manager, you have to look at who will be able to use the squad, or you have to do that research. And I'm sure like the short list that teams maintain, they have, okay, if something were to happen and something goes terribly bad with the manager, any team that they hired recently, they would have a short list to say, well, these are the other next ones that could fit in the bill. So I see that there is the two different ways of doing things. I think one, I see that the future is how Liverpool has done, and I think it's a good example of how and the other part is, to your point about squad building and finding solutions within the squad, and I think that's what Arne Slot probably is doing right now. Is okay, I need X, Y, and Z. Maybe they have a bigger. They will spend more in the winter window if they don't spend this time, just because, okay, then he's clearly knows that what are the deficiencies in my squad. I need to fix this X, Y, and Z. So the other part is the players you have, inside out what they're good at and what they're not good at.
Yeah.
And you always think the solution from the outside is better, but you don't know what their drawbacks are. So that's another part that gets lost in this.
That's really, really interesting. I think it'll be intriguing to see what we hear out of these two clubs as we get towards January. If Juve aren't really up there in the title race, I'm sure we'll hear rumors about them, but they may just not have the wiggle room. And Napoli, I don't think it'll even be rumors that we hear. I just think Conte will be blowing up in press conferences if he feels like things aren't going his way. But he can't really claim that he hasn't been given what he wanted, I don't think. Shall we leave Serie A behind then and head back to our favourite club this summer, Chelsea, of course. But this is an interesting one because Osimhen, they've decided or they've realised or whatever that probably is not going to happen, though we will see if that changes in the next few days. And now apparently they're looking at Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, this could just be Everton using Chelsea's name because Chelsea will buy anyone, and Everton have been trying to shift Calvert-Lewin seemingly all summer. 27 years old now. There was a point where he looked absolutely fantastic. He had a couple of good seasons in there where he was kind of 0.6 expected goals and assists per 90 minutes. He was 22, 23. This is back kind of over the pandemic, 2019 to 2021. Had a couple of, double figure Premier League goal campaigns back to back. But very injured. Injured all the time. The price, though, is now getting pretty low. How low do you think it has to get for you to become interested in Calvert-Lewin if you are a team like Chelsea?
I think he brings a couple of things to Chelsea. Last year, he was relatively injury-free. The 2 seasons before that, he missed a ton of games. So I think that he's a very, very distinct number 9 profile that presses well, counter presses well. It's really strong in the air. And one of the things I do is that, I don't know if you ever used Wisecout. They have something called Players' Best Actions, just a kind of a compilation of best actions. That's usually if you want to see it's just a highlight reel, what are his good things. No, they're slightly better than the YouTube highlight reels, by the way. There's no music and all that. So one of the things I noticed that I don't watch that to assess the player more than I just look at how frequent those are. Meaning there will be a clip from, let's say, last game, and then there will be a clip from if you're talking about a really good player, you would have multiple clips in a game and then multiple clips in the previous game, like that. With him, it's you see a clip in probably May, or I think there was a clip against maybe Spurs in the last game, and then you go back last season, then you go back 2 more months. So
Boy.
there hasn't been a lot. So on those clips, he looks really good. Like the way he moves, the way he runs, is really good. Like, definitely very technical player for a number 9. But he doesn't have those moments often. Now, Everton has been such a bad team in the last few years that some of that could be team related, that he doesn't get opportunities to kind of show off his skills. That's one thing I see if he moves to a Chelsea with a different cast of players around him. I think, and generally like higher caliber players across the squad. I think that would make a huge difference for him. And also, if you look at Chelsea front four, the players that they're all incredibly young. And I think he, at 27, he's not old, but he'd still be a veteran in that group. I think he would provide something that maybe that the others don't have. And then he'll bring something that the center forward play that I think they don't have in the squad. Now, he's not a really very good finisher. If you look at his XG stats over the years, like he does get into great situations, which is what XG measures, like for the most part, is how good of shooting locations or his decisions when to shoot. So his average XG for his career is like 0.16, which is pretty high. And
especially because those guys who are aerial targets quite often are getting a lot of very low XG attempts, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that he's still getting those high value shots too.
Yeah.
And just as well because his shot volume's terrible.
Yeah, his shot volume is like 2 to 2.5 shots per season, which is low for 9. Now, take that player, and this is one of the hardest problems for scouting as well as in football in terms of analytics, is how does take a player from a bad team? How to evaluate a good player on a bad team? Right. So is his numbers low because he's surrounded by not so good players? Sure, that is a factor, but how much of it? Like how much of it would improve if I put him around like if it's a 4-2-3-1, if I put him ahead of 3 really good attacking midfielders / wingers, how good that is going to be. I think that if he moves to Chelsea, I think he will get a lot more opportunities to shoot, not just because they'll create more chances with the squad they have, but also because at Everton or generally at more of an average or a below average team, he's probably one of their best players. So he's going to get a lot of attention from the opponents, that if I can stop that one guy, these guys cannot score against us, right? But at Chelsea or at a bigger team, I think they would have to deal with multiple threats, which means that might give him a little bit more opportunity, like a fraction of a second more, to maybe place his shot or take a better shot. So that's an aspect that I can't put a number on it. I think that some of that could be true, but he's a very different profile than Victor Osimhen. Like it's not the same at all. Like so, but the price wise, obviously, is also going to be, as you said, in the 20s. I think around 20s for him. Look at the way how Chelsea has spent money so far this season or in the last couple of years. Around 20 for him seems like a good number if that is where it is. But yeah, you're getting someone that is going to bring a few things that the team doesn't have, but you still have to depend. You still probably depend on the other attackers in terms of goal totals. I think he will add to it, but not sure after so many years of underperforming XG, like if I can attribute all of that to just because he's the only attacker that teams are defending or focusing attention on. That's why his conversion is low. Like I think he's generally been underperforming XG for many years.
Yeah. That's the thing that I find interesting about this, which is that Nicholas Jackson is a young player and doesn't have a long track record, and he underperformed XG significantly last season. But, we're not talking about that many shots a player has in a season. If a player has 3 shots a game and plays every game, then we're talking about 114 shots. That's not that many. So our default assumption, right, is normally that a player will probably come back to XG equals goals over time. Whereas with Calvert-Lewin, last 7 seasons, 53 goals from 67 XG, about 400 shots in that time, which is, okay, it's not enough that you would be like, we can be absolutely certain, but it's a lot more than we've got on Jackson, and it feels like quite good evidence that he's a bad finisher.
Yeah, it's a lot of evidence to we can't ignore, and I think that's going to be my thing with him, is that he's going to I think he's going to finish below average, or convert below average, but you might still get more goals from him just because you're going to accumulate a lot more because of playing with the other guys that Chelsea got.
It's an interesting one. Because in a way, it feels like it might if Chelsea end up doing this, it tells you something about where they think they are, because this is the kind of signing that I could imagine a team making if they thought they were on the cusp of something, and this will push us into the top 4. This will push us over the hump and get a title, because he's not going to be available probably all season. That there are some question marks about his output. Maybe this suggests that Chelsea, if they do it, think that they're around 4th, 5th, and that this could push them into those Champions League spots, which they do probably need financially.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. Just a quick question for you. Like, I know Arsenal's also rumored about a number 9 type number 9 signing. If they don't get the player they want, and if this is what's available, how do you see someone like an Arsenal looking at DCL?
There was a time I would have really liked that, because he was a kind of totally different weapon. That was before Arsenal signed Havertz, and I do think that profile was missing from the front line. Like, the front line, it's a bunch of little guys, like none of those guys are big. You've got Jesus, you've got Trossard, you've got Martinelli, you've got Saka. Nobody here is a big unit, and some of us have a sort of traumatic hangover from the Wenger days in that regard. Now, to me, I just think I'd probably rather have Havertz playing there, rather have Jesus playing there. I mean, assuming Jesus is fit. And I think it would prevent Arsenal from doing something on the wings, which is, to be honest, a bit more of a worry. Like, if Saka gets injured, there's a part of me that thinks Arsenal fans are deluding themselves by thinking you get in a winger, and if Saka gets injured, then you're okay. I think if Saka gets injured, like, your title chances decrease significantly. But it's clearly a real problem zone. Arsenal have basically no cover on the right, except for using Jesus there or putting Martinelli over there. Guys who don't belong there. So I wouldn't be upset about it if Arsenal did it, if it was really, really cheap. But to me, it would be a slightly strange one. I could definitely see it being useful, though. Last 20 minutes of games, you need a goal. You've got him, and you've got Havertz, and you've got Rice all crashing the box with Odegaard and Saka putting a ball in from the elbow of the box. That's a really dangerous weapon. And it would make probably more sense than getting tied into a big contract for a more expensive player, like the Gyökeres type stuff. But it would not be my first choice, I guess.
No, that's fair. I also asked in conjunction with that Eddie Nketiah is leaving.
Sure.
That from that perspective, just a profile that's a little different than what they have in the attacking group.
That would be interesting too, yeah, because I kind of forgot about Eddie leaving. He didn't play that much last season, but Eddie is a box player. He's tried to do a little bit more for Arsenal over the last few years, and he is defensively active, but he comes alive in the box. And it was weird that he became seen by Arsenal fans in the last couple of years as a poor finisher, when actually for his career before that, it was he does nothing but finish. He's not going to give you anything else, but he will get big chances. Maybe having somebody who has that, I don't know, this all feels like very soft stuff, but like those predatory instincts to get those big chances. Like you say, if Calvert-Lewin is getting high quality chances for Everton, for an Arsenal, for a Chelsea, he's going to get them. So from that point of view, yeah, if Arsenal did this for a relatively low fee, he is 27. You could give him a 2 or 3 year contract, probably not for that much money. I don't think it would be terrible.
He won't
It
be a
just wouldn't be
regular
my first
starter
choice.
anyway. He would be.
Yeah.
He would be like may play like a 1,200 minutes in a season.
Yeah, and I think he'd probably give you good value for that. And you know, as we've talked about fixture congestion, it does feel like those kind of 12 to 16th most used players on your roster are going to be increasingly important in determining the destination of trophies. But yeah, I don't know where he'll end up. I would like to see him still kind of make good on his promise, because at one stage he was just unmanageable as a centre forward. Which is maybe the only sense in which he does feel like Osimhen. Like when he's at his best, you just think, how do we handle this guy?
And that's the sense I got when I watched those clips, even though as rare they were, was that,
Sure.
wow, this guy can do a lot of things. Like he's a well-rounded skill set, but obviously injuries and also playing for a team that probably wasn't able to take advantage of all that played a part in where he is. And I think what is at this point, we can't ignore the evidence, is that he's going to be an under or like a below average finisher. So you just have to basically increase the denominator, or like, and so that could multiply you into getting into more shots and more you get more goals out of it. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of the Calvert-Lewin section, and there was only one other thing that I think we wanted to talk about before we got out of here, which was your Dani Olmo story.
Yeah, we talked about Dani Olmo, and he wasn't, until yesterday or the day before, he still wasn't registered, because even after they let go Gundogan, they didn't clear enough cap space. Or I keep saying cap space. That's very MLS term, but in the salary limit, they couldn't open enough window, and so finally they were able to register him, I think yesterday, because and it needed 4 different things to happen. One of them a very unfortunate thing. So Gundogan leaving, and they sold this young kid from Barca B, Mika Faye, to Stade Rennes for 10 million, loaned out the highly touted Vitor Roque to Betis. And then Andreas Christensen went down with a long-term injury, like they're saying it 4 months. So basically that gets them all the way to the next transfer window. So they can basically deregister him and then open up all this space. And that got Dani Olmo officially into the squad now. It's incredible. Like just how and they're already talking about, we heard a rumor they were looking to sign Chiesa a couple of days ago. And this was when Dani wasn't still registered. Maybe they are very confident they were always going to find a way, but it was just bizarre just reading that.
If you're at the point where you might just have to start sending players to Siberia because you need to fit new toys into your squad. I mean, fortunately, they do look good on the pitch at the moment.
They look very good on the pitch, yeah.
But one of their star players so far is Rafinha in the 10 space, who's going to now lose that spot presumably to Dani Olmo. It feels like classic Barcelona kind of clown show.
Yeah, and they keep getting bailed out by the talent they produce at La Masia. Like they're playing this 17-year-old kid as a center mid, Marc Bernal. He's very, very good. He's very, very good. And not to mention the other guys, they're other young kids they're playing, but yeah, I think that's what's been very good, and they're creating a lot of chances. I think Lewandowski probably could have had 6 goals by now. He only has 3 in 2 matches. So it's the dichotomy of how good they look on the field versus they definitely look shambles on the business on the like the sporting director, player roster, squad management side.
Yeah, they can't keep getting away with it, Ravi. It's so frustrating every time they get bailed out by just like some superstar centre back appearing out of nowhere. Some kid sprouts like somewhere outside Barcelona, wanders into the first team. It's so annoying.
And they get like with the Roque was supposed to be like this big star, along with I think him and Endrick were seen as the two next big starlets coming out of Brazil. Endrick went to Real Madrid, and with the Roque to Barcelona. Endrick scored this weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
And I do feel that Endrick is definitely, he's got some, I would say, something just beyond scoring goals. I think he's got a personality. I think, he's still very young, but I think he's going to be someone that will do very well in Real Madrid.
When you say personality, you mean as in he feels like he's able to kind of bear the pressure of being there?
Yeah. I think his game is very simple. That he just wants to score goals, and
he hits it as hard as he possibly can.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, to me, like, there is just a level of simplicity to his game that at that age, I'm sure he's going to mature, and he's turning to, he's going to add a lot more aspects to his game. But I think just at that level, he's like, I'm here to score goals. That's what I'm going to do. I think he had like 3 chances in the 2 or 3 chances in the 10 minutes or 7 minutes or 8 minutes he played. And, he scored literally off the last kick or before kick of the game. It was a tough game for Real Madrid. They still have to figure out the spacing issues with Mbappe, and it was a little better than the first game, but they still have to figure it out. I think he's still getting used to his teammates, Mbappe. But
sure,
I was really hoping to see Mbappe and Endrick together. But
sure.
Carlo is very smart. He subbed out Mbappe and brought on Endrick, because I think that, personally, I think Endrick will, if you give him enough opportunities, he will take that 9 role. I think he's. So you have to figure out who plays on the 2 wings and who's going to sit between the other 3. So I think Carlo is super smart. He doesn't want to get to that point yet. I think by February.
He's going to have to let Mbappe think it's his idea or something.
Yeah, something like that. So it's very fascinating. I think, to me, watching Real Madrid, I think the rest of until they get to the Champions League knockouts, is to see how they shape that front 4, front 3.
Yeah, it's exciting to watch. I love watching Ancelotti kind of play Jenga with his squads, like work out what he can kind of pull out here in order to build it up a bit there. Okay, I think that brings us to the end for today. Thank you very much to everybody for listening, for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Make sure, obviously, that you're subscribed to the newsletter, where you can still get the best football analysis going this summer. Enjoy this last week of the window. Take your B vitamins and get ready for the season actually beginning, which it feels like it hasn't yet. Thank you, Ravi. It's really good always to get your insight as well.
Thanks, Patrick.
We'll see you guys later. Bye.
See you guys.